we're following on with the challenges facing travel agents and the aviation sector. The purpose of the second part of our meeting today is to discuss the challenges facing by travel agents in the aviation sector. On behalf of the committee, I would particularly like to welcome to today's meeting Mr. Pat Dawson, CEO Irish Travel Agents Association, and Mr. Paul Hackett, Board Member Irish Travel Agents Association. We welcome you both back again. You're most welcome, and thank you for giving me this meeting at such short notice. Note and privilege. All witnesses are again reminded of long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity when in such a way as to make him or her or it identifiable or otherwise engage in speech that may be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statement or potentially defamatory in relation to an identified person or entity, direct to discontinue your remarks. It is imperative that you comply with any such direction. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the Houses or an official either by name or such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I'd like to remind members of the constitutional requirement that members must be physically present within the confines of the place which Parliament has chosen to sit, namely Leinster House and in our Convention Centre Dublin, in order to facilitate public meetings. I will not permit a member to participate, unfortunately, I cannot, a member to participate where they are not adhering to this constitutional requirement. Therefore, any member who attempts to participate from outside the precinct will reluctantly be asked to leave the meeting. In this regard, I would ask any member partaking via Teams that prior to making their contribution to the meeting that you confirm that you are on the grounds of Leinster House campus. I will now call on Mr. Hackett to make your opening statement. Mr. Hackett, just in context, we roughly have about 45 minutes overall, so we want to get as many questions as possible. So we'd ask that, obviously, you have a very good statement. Members will have read it, so we just give it a summarise so we can get into the questioning as quickly as possible. So, Mr. Hackett, thank you very much.
Thank you, Corry.
Apologies about the confines.
And committee members, we'd like to start with some good news. The airline refund process, and specifically with Ryanair, has improved. It is not complete. It's not working for everybody. But compared to where we were when we first addressed this committee back in October 2020, the position is much improved. We attribute that in no small part to the coverage the item received when raised at this committee. And so we would like to thank you, Oireachtas, and your committee members for your assistance in helping to resolve this issue. The travel industry, airports and airlines need clarity as to when we can restart trading with a safe reopening of international travel for our corporate and leisure markets. Hotels in Ireland need to know if they can accept international visitors in 2021. It's important to remember 75% of the income in the hospitality sector comes from the international market. Until such time as full restart plans are announced, we are very keen to support the regional airports of Cork, Shannon and Knock, and we call on the government to be generous in their support for all Irish airports and to support the pillar airlines that we rely on in Ireland. We have heard that Cork Airport would be closed for 10 weeks from September. To close a key regional airport just when international travel is restarting is not good. The EU Commission launched the Digital Green Certificates almost 2 months ago on March 17th. The EU Parliament last week voted to approve the certificates and recommended they be renamed EU COVID-19 certificates. This will be law in June and must be implemented by all member states within 6 to 8 weeks. This is a regulation, and it is not a pick and mix option as mentioned by the Minister for Health on RT News last week. This is a mass harmonisation piece of legislation, and the objective is to have travel within the EU reopen safely, with all EU member states adopting the certificates. The Irish government must do this, and in doing so they must revoke the advice against non-essential international travel. As referenced earlier this week, on Monday, May 3rd, we also need to open up to travel in and outside of the EU. The UK and USA are core markets for our corporate and leisure travel. The EU Commission announced a plan for Schengen member states to allow travel from fully vaccinated people, and we urge the Irish government to adopt this proposal. As things stand, it's illegal to travel to a port or airport for non-essential travel. And if you do so, there is a fine of €2,000 per person. There are 35 different statutory instruments implemented since January of this year that control and limit international travel. We need a plan and a commitment to unwind these statutory instruments once the vaccination rollout hits the level of 82% by the end of June, as is the current target. An Taoiseach in the Week in Politics last week said, "We cannot seal off the island forever. We are an interconnected global island." Taking all that into account, as well as the improving position in our hospitals, the overall levels of COVID, and the positivity around the vaccine rollout, Ireland needs to implement the EU COVID-19 certificates in full and without delay, and to open up to international visitors and to allow Irish citizens the right to travel, at least within the EU to begin with. We want to note our concern around the costs of PCR testing. At approximately €100 per person, we think PCR test costs are too high. They are anti-family and a cost deterrent for international travel. We are surprised to see that the Irish government has not adopted the recommendations of the Ferguson report on antigen testing, and we note the irony that the HSE themselves are using antigen testing in some facilities. One important consideration around continued travel restrictions in the Republic is that international travel will recommence from Northern Ireland's airports sometime between mid-May and mid-June. We have already seen Ryanair opening a new base in Belfast City Airport, adding 10 new routes. Moving assets from the Republic is a very easy thing to do for both Aer Lingus and Ryanair. And this is because both airlines have been forced to do so, given there is no plan to open Ireland for international travel. Bookings for international travel are still around 85% down. There'll be no recovery until consumer confidence returns. No other sector has had little or no income since March 2020. Irish hotels had some income last summer, travel agents had none. And being 85 to 95% down is effectively minus income, as our cost base, even with massive reductions, is still substantial. We have met with transport ministers, all political parties, and countless TDs and senators, all of whom have been understanding and sympathetic to our plight. But what pocket do we put that into? Sympathy and understanding are not something we can pass on to our landlords, our IT providers, insurance companies, and the staff we must retain. There is a 6 to 9 month delay between booking and travel, which means that our sector must work for 6 to 9 months before we actually count the income generated from advance bookings. So long as there's no income, the travel industry needs to see ongoing support from government. We are getting the wage subsidy and CRSS. CRSS needs to be repurposed and linked to the guidance on international travel, and we do hope to see extensions of support beyond the 30th of June. The travel industry needs to see supports continue until we no longer meet the qualifying criteria. The support is needed now ahead of the restart to financially rebuild in order to reduce our dependency on the state. Without ongoing and targeted sector-specific supports, there will be more failures in our industry. There's no need for that to happen. Customers have full protection because all travel agents are licensed and bonded, so additional support would prevent company failures. One last point before I finish. There's something we need to bring to your attention, and it is because of COVID-19 and the impact on the travel industry, some merchant service providers are taking a very hard line and demanding substantial cash deposits from travel agents. This is a direct challenge to the bonding and licensing arrangements which the government has in place for travel agents. Some of the companies involved are associated with our partially state-owned banks. This is a very serious issue for the sector, and the government must address this, given they have poured millions of euro into supporting this sector during the pandemic, only to have the very future of the sector put at risk by these staggering demands for cash security. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very, very much. We'll now move to questioners. First questioner, Fine Gael slot, is Senator Jerry Buttimer. Senator Buttimer, you have 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah, very good, Chairman. Thank you. Can I welcome Mr. Dawson and Mr. Hackett again to the meeting. Could I just begin with the end paragraph of Mr. Hackett's contribution, Chairman, which is a very worrying development in terms of merchant service providers. Could I ask Mr. Hackett, could he explain what is exactly happening with the merchant service providers? Because this is a worry and a concern now if there's a bully boy attitude being taken on our travel agents, and I would hope that we will not have that tolerated, and I'll come back in after Mr. Hackett has replied. Thank you.
Mr. Hackett.
So just to explain, the merchant service providers are the companies which facilitate merchants, retailers like ourselves, travel agents like ourselves, to accept credit cards. So it's the technical piece whereby we accept the card from the consumer. We're bonded and licensed by the Commission for Aviation Regulation, so there is zero risk. There has been some exposure to the merchant service providers for travel that is outside of the bonding and licensing arrangement. So people book accommodation only or flight only directly with an airline. That is not covered under the bonding and protection. However, our sector is fully protected. And the merchant service people are effectively putting in place a double bonding mechanism, or requesting a double bonding mechanism, whereby we provide them with additional cash security over and above the bonding that we are providing to the Commission for Aviation Regulation. So this is a cash drain. There simply is no risk to their there's no risk attachable to what they're talking about. And it really is important that we see the Commission for Aviation Regulation and the Department of Transport, and also the Department of Finance, because some of these entities are regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland, look at and get transparency from these companies as to where they assess the risk, because we have asked for them to quantify this risk and to show us where they have been left out of pocket, and we don't believe it exists within the bonded sector. And
have they replied to you on that request? And is this a new development? And if it is a new development, then, Chairman, we should take action as a committee. But I'll ask Mr. Hackett to reply to that, please.
Yeah. This has happened intermittently, Senator Buttimer. Like, this is, in my time with my business, it's the third time I've seen it. First time was when we were starting up, understandable. Second time, they approached us, we explained the bonding mechanism, the Commission were involved, and all parties were happy with regard to the risk element being controlled. And we see this as being a reaction to what's happened with COVID, whereby chargebacks have effectively landed on their desks, but not from within the licensed and bonded travel agent sector. We're saying we're unique. The Commission for Aviation Regulation licensed us. The bond is in place for our turnover. There is no risk to the merchant service providers, and this is double bonding.
Chairman, I'll conclude on this. That's a very worrying development, that an industry that's been hardest hit is now being demanded by a merchant service provider in a very unfair manner. And I would propose that we, as a committee, take action in support of the travel agents, Chairman. And I thank Mr. Hackett for his contribution.
And maybe in that regard, Mr. Hackett, that we might you might give us the details specifically as to who we should follow up with. We very much take on board Senator Buttimer's proposal. And we want to support the industry. Okay. We now move. Sinn Féin, our facilitating Deputy Crowe, who has to go to another meeting. Deputy Crowe, you have 3 to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to thank Deputies O'Murku and O'Rourke for kindly obliging. Just to welcome our witnesses, I'm going to get straight into my questioning. So we've heard to a huge extent from the aviation sector and others in tourism in recent weeks the whole need for a lead-in period. And I would like to know in a moment, obviously, you say in your opening statement that there's usually a 6 to 9 month period from the time of booking to the time of travelling. So has your lead-in period for summer 2021 already passed you by? I suppose the first question. I also want to know then, we are all anticipating some form of resumption of, there should be, we hope there'll be a fairly buoyant domestic tourism market, but also international tourism that we heavily depend on. We all expect there'll be some return to that in the midsummer period. But the big concern is that consumers are fickle, and those who at the moment are clambering over each other to get bookings in West Clare and Westport and Killarney and all over Ireland, as soon as it's possible for them, I think, to fly to Gran Canaria, etc., you will see a shift, I expect, in demand. A concern I have is, as Irish consumers move from the west of Ireland hotel break to the international travel, there's a vacuum potentially there, and will we have a return of the North American travellers to fill that vacuum? I just want to see how are you strategising for the shoulder season beyond the summer, and what lead-in period do you need, and has some of that already passed you by, and what supports, other than what you've mentioned, should we be championing on your behalf in government and as a committee? Thank you.
In terms of the first question on summer 2021, there effectively is nobody booking summer 2021 at the moment. There's a small, improvement in trading, but like from being minus 95% down to minus 85% down is not really much to brag about. So consumers need confidence, and that's going to come from the vaccine rollout, and that's going to come from the implementation of the digital green certificates. And until that is clear, we're not going to see consumers booking. So consumers, I think, have had so many lost opportunities and cancellations on holidays last year and earlier this year that they're absolutely now, with the vaccination piece in sight, waiting until they have clarity on that. In terms of the internal market, naturally, if we open within the EU, internal traffic from other EU states into Ireland is something that I'm sure the Irish hotels and the Irish hospitality sector would dearly welcome. So that should be in place. But, in terms of our booking period, that's the delay, the lag time between when somebody puts a deposit down and when they travel. We don't count the profit until when they travel. And from a trading point of view, when you're had practically zero trading for 14 months, we are looking at another 6-9 months of very low levels of trading before we can return to profitability or return to break even, let alone profitability. Mr. Dawson, is there anything else you'd like to?
Yeah, and Deputy, I mean, we've spoken to, Aer Lingus on several occasions, being a large carrier of this country, and they tell us to get 40-50% of their fleet up in the air, it'll take 2 to 3 months. So it's just not a switch on and oven situation and away we go. I mean, airlines need to know what's happening in 2 or 3 months' time. And if we're slow in getting moving, everyone is going to be affected, both inbound and outbound, and of course the airports. And as you say, home holidays are the thing at the moment. And, travel agents are looking at booking September because we had a nightmare, as you know, getting refunds, changing people. And we've said to all the customers, if you're booking something, make sure it's refundable or changeable. Because if you remember, we had that discussion about ghost flights last year, which was the biggest scandal in the industry in Ireland, where airplanes flew empty, kept the people's money, and there was thousands and thousands of families affected by this. And this is something that we're very, very much aware of, again, and we don't need that, and certainly the customers don't need it.
Okay, I want to thank the witnesses, and please pardon me, I have to go to another meeting. I do appreciate and more than happy to engage with you beyond this meeting as well. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sinn Féin, for facilitating.
And now we move to the facilitators. Deputy O'Rourke, you have 3 to 4 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to Mr. Dawson and Mr. Hackett. And just to say at the outset, there's some news in recent weeks of big companies in the sector that had closed down, and it was just sorry to see that, and just to extend solidarity to all of the companies that you work with. Can I ask in relation to just what concerns or opportunity do you see and travel agency in relation to the implementation of the digital green cert? And if you could touch on the point that's already been made in terms of confidence. So what do you need to see that you think that prospective customers want to see from that programme in terms of its rollout? And if you could touch on, the opportunity that exists in terms of antigen testing. We just spent the last hour in a very good meeting with Professor Ferguson. Thank you.
On the digital certificate, it has to be uniform and it has to be rolled out at the same time. We do not want a situation where Ireland, again, we're an outlier as such, and we have been outliers with international travel. Of course, we take the situation of health into consideration. But having said all of that, we do not want a situation where using traffic lights, which they may use, that will change. People are stuck out on the holidays, they don't have insurance or whatnot. So it has to be uniform. And we see flags with some government statements about the fact that the 6 or 8 weeks parameters that's now supposed to happen, that we get this sort of feeling that Ireland will stretch this out and it might be 12 or 14 weeks. We're saying now is the time to get ready. It's a big task to get ready. This flag has been raised, Deputy, for many, many months. It may have been announced by the EU, only a couple of days ago and agreed with them. But having said all of that, we needed action now as soon as possible. And we do not want the Irish government deviation and being an outliner, because, as Paul said in his statement, it's not a picks and mix. You're either in and you're out. And we fear that Ireland may be dodging this and try and put back inbound and outbound travel, which the country cannot afford. I'm sure Paul would like to add to the other questions.
In terms of concerns, Deputy O'Rourke, I think our concern would be, currently we're aware that this is sitting with the Department of Health. they have an awful lot on their plate, as I think all of us would agree. There's also going to be technical requirements in order to put this digital certificate in place for all EU countries within the envisaged timeframe. So our concerns rest with, without casting aspersions on the ability of the Department of Health, is this another piece of work that they have to do, and could that be an inadvertent delay? And just the requirement on the technical piece, where are we up to with regard to the government? This is the clearest, most straightforward piece of a proposal in terms of fully vaccinated people who've recovered from COVID, or people who have PCR testing. And it is a clear path that makes the harmonisation and the simplicity of travel within the EU straightforward, and something that is possible for the aviation, the airline sectors and the travel industry to adopt. So it needs to happen. We need to know when it's going to happen. And then when that happens, the confidence will follow from that, because the consumers have heard about it, but they're hearing some mixed messages and they're not quite sure when. And as a consequence, we also have all of our advice against international travel. So that has to be wound down to coincide with digital certificates, because, we are on a pathway at this stage. This is a very different year to 2021 in terms of the vaccination rollout being in place across Europe. So that it's just the reality of those positions.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think, Chair, you'll agree that there's a lot that mirrors the first hour in terms of the window of opportunity for preparation and making sure that preparation is done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Mr. Hackett, I just want to follow up. Just first question. In terms of the travel agents in Ireland, is it just outbound traffic you deal with, or do you deal with people coming into Ireland as well?
The Irish Travel Agents Association is mainly outbound traffic and some domestic traffic. Quite a number of us offered domestic holidays last year through our shops, through our retail websites. In terms of the inbound, they're a different organisation. That would be ITIC. I'm not quite sure of the actual name; it just escapes me at the moment. But they look after the inbound, the inbound traffic business.
They would be Irish based as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, they're based on Walsh and Ruth Andrews, who I think have addressed you on different parts of the committee at different times.
And clearly, from your responses, you've done quite a bit of research into the process by which the digital green pass comes into operation, more particularly from the Irish side. So if you might just give us your perspective in terms of, in your view, who ultimately will make the decision here, whether Ireland adopts the digital green cert in the generic model that's coming from Europe? Is it the department? You made reference there to the Department of Health. Where does it sit in the context of the Department of Transport, the Department of Taoiseach, Department of Justice? So it's clear to me from the way you've spoken, you've looked at this in great depth. So you might just give us your perspective, because we are going to follow up. I don't know if you had an opportunity to listen into Professor Ferguson's presentation in the first session.
Unfortunately not.
Yeah, but ultimately we're looking at writing in terms of getting a pilot programme up and running now, particularly around antigen testing, that would link into the green pass coming in a European context straight away. So ultimately that you'd have a pilot programme set up and running, maybe with a route going to the UK, air travel route, and then it would enable you to set up the logistics to have such an operation in place when the digital green pass comes in place. So just give us your perspective as what you believe is the mechanism to get this signed off at an Irish level, and in terms of pilot programmes and everything else. I know it's a hard question, but it's a key question.
Our understanding is that currently the digital green certificates are sitting with the Department of Health. Our understanding also is that the Department of Taoiseach have oversight of this particular area. There has been reference to some of the e-commerce piece being involved with one of the junior ministers. So that's currently where it's at. Where we need the certainty is
before you conclude, Mr. Hackett.
Yep.
Does the Department of Transport have a role in this?
But they will have a role in terms of they're the key department. They're our line department that we engage with. All of the airports, all of the airlines, all of the travel sector would engage with the Department of Transport. So they should be very closely involved with this. This should be something that they can, bring their intelligence to play.
But if you were to, in terms of the process by which the digital green cert is being looked at by government level, is the heavy lifting being done in the Department of Health?
That's our understanding.
Okay, and so I cut you at the pass there. Just to conclude your point, the key point for you.
Some key points here in terms of the communication, because I don't think some of the communication from different spokespeople have been clear on this. This is an EU regulation. This is not an opt-in, opt-out clause. It is not pick and mix. These are digital green certificates that have been approved by the EU Commission, passed last week at the European Parliament. And, they're very clear as to what they do. And their objective is to have mass harmonisation in Europe, subject to the public health guidance around vaccination, around recovery from PCR and PCR testing. So these are not something that we should be afraid of. This is effectively our certificate to freedom in terms of travel, both inbound and outbound in this country. And, it's those points. It's the clarity on the communication. It's the clarity on when this is going to be implemented. And it's for consumers to know when this is going to happen and what does that mean.
What role, as far as you're concerned, it has legal status in a European context, which
yes.
all the individual countries have signed up to, and so therefore, what? As
a regulation, there is no option for Ireland to veto this or to opt out.
And if so, where does what flexibility has the Irish government and the Irish authorities around the implementation of this digital green certificate? Do they have any flexibility?
Our understanding is there is a time lag between when it is passed in Europe and when it is implemented here. And our other concern rests with the technical ability to deliver this within our country.
And what is the timescale? What's your understanding in terms of the timescale that must be implemented?
6 weeks is our understanding of the implementation time.
From what date?
6 weeks from, I think, mid-June, the start of June to mid-June.
Okay.
There's talk of the 8th of June is when it's going to be passed.
And
there's still quite a bit of work to be done.
Your worries around the technical capability to roll it out. You might just elaborate there, because we now are, even at this point, we're still 6 weeks away from the middle of June. So is there time to overcome that?
Well, I think if we're, we're a very technically creative island. We have some of the best tech companies in our economy. So we should be engaging with these companies to ensure that we have the technical ability to do so. We can't have various bits of paper. This is going to be a QR code type scenario. We need it to be fast, efficient, really robust, so that the public health authorities are confident in how it's being implemented as well. So there's quite an amount of work to be done, and that needs to be happening. And hopefully it is happening behind the scenes.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interject and say that our worry is there's nobody taking ownership of this. Everyone is involved, but nobody is involved. So we need to know definitely who is carrying this ball to get the job done as such. And that's why we are concerned about it, that we don't know who the go-to person, ministers or other people within the government.
Mr. Dawson, do you believe the Department of Health are the reluctant carriers of the ball at the moment?
I think on form, yes, absolutely. I think they are, and I think, this is something we should be proud of. We should be all saying, look, it's nearly as good as news as the vaccination is good news. But we know from dealing with this situation over the last 12 months, there is some brakes being put on this somewhere, and we don't know who to go to. And I think, Chairman, I think you probably spot that as well.
Mr. Dawson, do you have concluding comment? Mr. Hackett, do you have concluding comments before I move to the next speaker?
No.
Okay. So we are following up. We see the two sessions today. We're going to be writing to get that sense of clarity, to get a pilot programme up and running, so we see action. We see this as the key gateway in terms of getting a rollout and getting digital green cert up and running. Pilot programme, antigen testing, linked into a time frame in terms of a rollout. 6 weeks from the middle of June is bringing you up to the end of July. That's too late.
Exactly.
Can we move to...
that is way too late, Chairman, you're right.
Yeah, it's too late. So the urgency is now, and we want to work in a proactive way with all government departments to get pilot programme up and running. Yes. With the ultimate objective to get the digital green cert functioning at European level, obviously with public health being secure in public safety for all passengers and the Irish public as well. Can we now move to Deputy O'Murray-Coo? Deputy O'Murray-Coo, you have 4 minutes.
I'd like to thank Mr. Dawson and Mr. Hackett. In fairness, they've been fairly comprehensive into laying out what they require. Obviously here, what Professor Ferguson had spoken to us about and the possibility of a pilot will provide us possibly with some sort of roadmap for aviation combined with the digital green certificates. There's obviously a necessity for us to do follow-up that we ensure on both levels that we have the capacity. There's no point us being willing to do something and then not being able to deliver upon it. And look, we've had those IT issues before, but I accept what has been said, that that's really unacceptable in such a technically proficient state as this. Right. I would like to just very quickly, in relation to Ryanair and the refunds, obviously that's improved. I've heard that anecdotally myself. What are the issues still remaining? Is it just the numbers, or do we still have an issue around group refunds? I accept the issue around obviously the double bonding in banks, and that is something we have to follow up on. Then the CRSS, and your ask is obviously for this to be repurposed and connected to travel guidance. Look, that makes sense. What other sector-specific asks do you have? Because I know that's still a particular issue with a number of travel agents that I've spoken to that are very glad that you're here today. But it's just that idea of you need something that's industry-specific to ensure that we get to the other end of this pandemic.
Deputy, it has to be said that we are grateful for the support we've seen so far with salaries, wages, and they have been very helpful. And certainly, when we did qualify for the CRSS, remember we only qualified at level 5, and so it might have been 40% of last year. So when non-essential retail is now okay to do, that is when we are supposed to fall out of the CRSS. And as I've said to the department at a meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, there is no doubt about it that without the CRSS, 50 travel agencies would have failed. There is no question about that. That was a saviour. And if it's not reinstated, or if it's not kept going until the end of the year, we will have similar collapses like the JWT one we had last week.
I accept you've won the argument, I'd say, in this committee. So it's a matter of what other requirements do you have, and we probably need some detail in relation to that we can chase up, because we're probably in the final discussions in relation to what supports are going to be offered into the future for all sectors. So you need to be considered as part of that conversation.
What we can do, Deputy, is we could share with you the documentation that we have presented to the ministers, Minister Ryan and Minister Naughton, and to the Department of Transport. And we're also in discussions with them again this week on the possibility of some additional cash flow funding, which will overcome that time lag between bookings and profitability and the industry returning, because as Mr. Dawson says, the supports have prevented collapse. Whilst the collapse last week was very unfortunate, considering this sector has had no income, to have so few collapses is a sign of the resilience and the strength that exists within the sector, and is contingent on the supports continuing.
No, I appreciate that. Just if I get a very quick question in relation to where we are on the refunds that are still remaining as regards Ryanair, and whether there is a problem still in relation to those group bookings.
Where this came from was the conflict that exists between two pieces of EU legislation, 261 and PTD, the Package Travel Directive. The numbers are really the issue, and just the time delay, the time delay in getting this sorted out. Some agents are still having issues with Ryanair, but for the most part, Ryanair have processes in place. Not ideal in terms of how it works for the travel industry, but they have processes in place, and for the most part, they are working. It is an ongoing process, and I would have to say it has improved no end since October. Still far from ideal, but getting there, and consumers are getting their refunds, albeit slower.
Thank you. We'll now move to Deputy James O'Connor. Fianna Fáil start. Deputy O'Connor, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And just to confirm that I am in the Leinster House complex. Gentlemen, I'd just like to thank Mr. Dawson and Mr. Hackett for your presentation to the committee. Generally, you know, I suppose it's an observation really of what's been going on here for the last number of months that has, I think, very much damaged the entire industry around travel agents, around international travel, aviation, and obviously all of the jobs in tourism that stem as a result of that. I think is the attitude that some people took on as regards international travel. I think there's been, this is something I am hearing from a lot of people working in tourism in Ireland, that they are very worried about the level of public confidence at the moment in international travel. And that is something I've spoken about in this committee before. I think it's something that the Oireachtas as a whole needs to deal with. Look, we are heading for a situation, thankfully, by the end of June, where I think 80% of the Irish population are expected to have received either their first dose or been fully vaccinated. And that should very much put us on a springboard to allow people to start international travel for inbound travellers into Ireland, which is obviously fantastic for hotels in this country and for travel in general, but also to allow Irish citizens to travel abroad. Now, you've identified 2 very significant issues earlier in your contributions today that I just want to pick up on, Chairman. One of them, of course, was the fact that Ireland, which was formerly part of the common travel area with the United Kingdom, in the sense that we had that existing arrangement prior to Brexit, and of course the fact that we're not involved in Schengen, which is ploughing ahead with its own individual plans for international travel. And I just want to utilise my time in the committee here today just to say, as a Fianna Fáil TD, as our own spokesperson on transport, how important I think it is that we would follow suit with the Schengen plan, and to actually work with the countries in Schengen to allow Irish travellers to go to the United States once we've reached a satisfactory level of vaccination and inoculation in our own population. And we're getting there very quick. There's no doubt about that. Like we are making progress. We all know it was difficult, it was slow, but you know, thankfully it is now progressing. And I think that reopening the US-Ireland travel channel is incredibly important for yourselves. And in addition to that, just to put it into perspective, I spoke to one hotelier yesterday who told me that 65% of his bookings in a luxury 5-star hotel on the western coast of this country was coming from the United States, travellers coming into Ireland, and 75% of his revenue, was as a result of United States bookings. So that just shows the level of importance it has for our own economy. So obviously, if we want people coming in, we need to let people go out as well, which is important. You know, I know a lot of people give out that there's money exiting the economy, but to be honest, you know, if the travel agents in Ireland are doing well out of it, or domestic airlines here, of course, will do well from international travel and business, people working in Irish airports, and that has all to be stated. And look, I suppose I'd like to ask one question in general, or sorry, one more observation. You were asking earlier on about and Chairman was asking about where necessarily the calls need to go here. Look, from my own perspective, it's obvious that NEFIT, from my read of the situation, are the ones that are causing the difficulties for all of you. Because, you know, I think at a ministerial level, in all fairness, many of the departments want to see travel open up again. We want to see antigen testing being put in place. I've heard that off the record from many different ministers and from people working in departments. They want to see movement in that, following on from the academic reports that have been done. But the issue seems to be NEFIT. That's my read of the situation. And Chairman, I think, you know, to do some bit of justice to everybody who's come before the committee here, perhaps it's time for us to be looking for NEFIT to come before the committee again. They obliged us before. I think it's high time that we bring them back again. But look, I'll ask one question and I'll finalise on that.
We've made the decision to invite NEFIT. So
great.
That's
my question, Chair, is in terms of the United States travel, how important is that for travel agents in Ireland? And I just ask that final question to allow you to answer that, please.
Deputy O'Connor, it's absolutely huge. Both from we have a huge amount of people going on. Remember, the business section of our business is 500 million a year, and the vast majority of that would go long haul to the States. And I see where Aer Lingus have pulled some routes from the United States already. And the thing about US visitors, they do at least 1 year, if not 2 years, planning in advance. So this summer is now a write-off for American visitors. And hopefully that if we move quickly enough, and remember, what we do now is going to affect next year for those tourists. So we've got to be seen to move and get our act together quickly to get those tourists back, because there are plenty of other countries that the Americans will go to. They don't necessarily have to have connections in Ireland, but many of them come here to see our green country, and Irish and Americans get on well together. But there is a problem with that. This season is lost. Next season is what we have to work about now. And the inbound and outbound tourism, not alone do we send many hundreds of thousands to Frisco, to Florida and New York and all those city breaks, Las Vegas, whatever else. And there are many increased flights out of Ireland over the last number of years with American carriers and Aer Lingus. So the growth has been there, but we will lose that because everyone is running after all this business and we cannot left behind. Whether Paul would like to add to my comments?
I would just like to say, David O'Connor, I think you're correct. The Schengen proposal that was announced on Monday is the way for us to open up to the UK and to the US, and these are vital. Whenever we speak, even though the Travel Agents Association are outbound, we would always be focused as well on our inbound counterparts and the domestic travel industry, which is hugely important in this country. As you quite rightly say, 75% of the income for the hotel business and the hospitality business in Ireland comes from the international market. You can't have outbound without inbound. The Irish Travel Agents Association and ITIC work hand in glove. We support the airlines because the airlines and the airports need traffic both ways. No route is going to be a single directional route. It's going to have traffic coming both ways in order for it to be viable. So our connectivity is critically important, and it was great to hear on Taoiseach the other day recognise that fact, that we are a global connected island. We've got to get back to that. International travel, as you quite rightly say, has been very unfairly demonised, when there are other things that are still sorely missing, such as the community transmission numbers in test and trace stack up to that. And a lot of the time I think international travel has been a very convenient distraction. And that's where the demonisation has come from. But if we move on from that, we have proposals on the table in terms of the digital green certificate. We have proposals on the Schengen area for the UK and the US, and they need to be acted on.
Thanks, Mr. Hackett.
And we also need to extend. We also need to extend, and particularly, the world is not built around Dublin. As I know, and as we all know. So, I mean, the airports like Shannon Airport needs to be help and assistance with transatlantic travel. There's no traffic there at the moment. And Cork and Knock Airport. And they really need big assistance. Dublin are doing a wonderful job. They have 32 million passengers. Well, they had 32 million.
Mr. Dawson.
Their recovery will be quicker.
Thank you. We'll move now to Deputy Smith, the Labour slot. Mr. Deputy Smith, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'll be brief. I think it's an important point raised, I think by Pat earlier, that we need to look at the digital green certificate in a more positive way. Being supportive of this and being supportive of safe travel does not compromise anyone's support of strong public health policy either. They are both things that are worthy of support. And indeed, in terms of the digital green certificate, something that's needed for our aviation sector, and that's unequivocal. Look, I just have one question because time is our enemy. Look, in your report statement, page 2, you state there are 35 different statutory instruments implemented since January of this year. How come there's so many?
It's a very good question. There's over 200 statutory instruments have been enacted this year alone, and as we all know, the statutory instruments don't require a vote. I think if anything, it's evidence, Deputy Smith, as to how controlled and limited we are now on international travel, and we are where we are, and we've got to move on. What we need is a plan to have these unwound. We need a date at which it will no longer be illegal to travel to an airport or a port, where it will no longer be subject to a €2,000 fine now that we have inter-county travel resuming next week. So, the reality is they have all been enacted under the Health Act. They are there. I unfortunately have a page with a list, and I could share it with you, but it's not going to make for pleasant reading. It's where Ireland has treated international travel. We are an outlier with regard to how we have managed international travel. We're hearing it again. We had the French ambassador on the radio this morning. We had the Italian ambassador on the radio last week. We're losing friends in Europe over this and beyond.
the list. I know it might make for not particularly good reading, but it's also vital reading. Okay, so
and it's on statutoryinstruments.ie. It's on the government website.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Deputy Smith?
No, Chair, it's 2:25. I'll leave it there in the interest of having another member speak. Thank you to the witnesses. Again, it's depressing how often we see each other. I think you understand why I'm saying that.
I do, definitely. We do.
We move now to Deputy Michael Lowry. Deputy Lowry, you have 4 minutes.
Chairman, I'll be brief because most of the territory has been covered already. Just to welcome our guests and thank them again for their interesting and informative contribution. We've had you in on a number of occasions, and I think you have to agree that our committee has listened and we have supported your case. I'm very much in favour of reopening our economy, and to reopen our economy, we must reopen our airports and allow our people to travel out and others to come in. I think I raised the digital green cert with the Taoiseach some months ago, and at that stage the government had set their face against the digital green cert. I believe firmly that there should be a vaccination dividend, and if somebody is fully vaccinated, they should be allowed the freedom to move around. There's not much. What I see about that is, the analogy I would draw is that somebody who refuses to take the vaccination, in my view, that individual, him or her, are damaging our prospects of recovering from this pandemic. So people who offer for the vaccination and be fully vaccinated should be able to travel in a safe way. The digital green cert, we went into that as a country, we went into that reluctantly, and there's a lot of hesitancy about it. And the only reason I think we're in it is because we were forced into it by the EU. And I fear that our government is going to drag its heels in relation to the implementation of this. And I would like to see, if you forward to us the statements that you have issued to government and to the Department of Transport in regard to this, so that we can be aware of what we need to push. But I certainly would be pushing for advancing the digital green cert in line with other European Union countries as quickly as possible. That's really, I think, also Schengen Agreement. We certainly have to be cognizant of that, and we have to be on a level playing pitch. There's no doubt inward traffic into Ireland is required to reboot the industry, and in particular to get our people at the airports back into meaningful employment, and that we can start to rebuild so much that we have lost over the last 2 years. Thank you.
Mr. Dawson, you wish to comment, and maybe in the context of, do you see the digital green cert pass as the single most important element to get aviation reopened in Ireland, and obviously by extension our economy as well?
Mr. Chairman, I do. It's the only show in town, and it's going to get us across the line, and it's going to save those 400,000 jobs, both inbound and outbound, both at our airports and all our pilots and all the people working around the 4 or 5 different airports. It's the only thing that's going to get it out of this mess, and that's why it's nearly more urgent than vaccination. It's nearly, not quite as such. That's how urgent it is. And we cannot be playing ducks and drakes with it. We've got to get somebody in the government to take charge of this the way your committee can push them and check on exactly where we are. And, when you think of, it's been past a couple of weeks, there's another 6 or 8 weeks. I mean, how long does this thing take? We have the technology in this country, so let them get it done quickly.
We now move to Senator Crockwell. Senator Crockwell, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your presentation this morning. My heart goes out to members of the travel agents. We've seen one of the biggest go, the one that was synonymous with Irish travel for so many years. Having lost a business myself many years ago, I can say it was my fault. those that are going out of business in the travel industry at the moment, it's not their fault. It is most unfortunate. Look, there's one elephant in the room, as far as I'm concerned, or one theme that seems to be coming across here. Department of Health is running everything. Your masters, if you want, is the Department of Transport. I'm concerned that the Department of Health has too many tentacles out there, and that you can't keep all the balls in the air without dropping some. And I'd be interested in what you have to say on that. The other thing is, at the Defence and Foreign Affairs Committee the other day, Simon Coveney, Minister Coveney, was very positive in his support for trying to get the economy back running as normal as possible. And with that in mind, you have constantly referenced the IT sector in Ireland. Are you aware of the development of a mobile app that will allow people to present their phone at the airport to show that they've been vaccinated or had the virus or had both or have not been vaccinated, as the case may be, in order to facilitate travel? Because we have to get people back in the air. There are airline pilots in this country who are desperately trying to keep their license up to date. There are travel agents struggling to keep their thing going. And I do see for the first time today that there's a sort of a 6 to 9 month lag before you guys will start to see profits coming back into your businesses, the small few that will still be there. So I am wondering, do you see the same elephant in the room that I see? And the mobile app, those are the two things that are concerned.
If I may take the mobile app first.
Yeah.
We have heard that IBM and Salesforce have been tasked with developing the technology to implement the digital green certificates. But as Mr. Dawson said earlier, it is unclear is owner of this particular, who is the project manager of this particular issue, and that's what we need to have. I would agree with you. Like, I think the Department of Health, their focus at the moment, quite rightly, must be on the vaccine rollout. The hospital numbers seem to be under control. Case numbers are where they are, but in broad terms, the vaccine rollout is their absolute focus.
Mr. Hackett, with that app, with IBM and Salesforce, who's that with? Is that with Department of Health, or who's that with, that particular contract? Is it anecdotally you're hearing it?
It's more like I heard it on the news this week, on the RT news this week, that this contract is in place or this contract is being signed. But it would be great to know that this is in hand and that we have a timeline and that we're going to deliver this by this particular timeline. It's going to be a QR code, and it's not for us as an association to dictate what government departments are best placed to implement.
We'll follow
tasks.
up on that.
But as business people, we know ourselves that we can't, none of us as CEOs or whoever it is can run your business on your own. You have your board, you have your senior management team, you have a great staff of people. You need to spread the load, you need to get the work done, and you need to meet the guidelines and the deadlines that are there.
Chairman, if I might just interject for a second, one of the things that concerns me is in this green search we're talking about, there has to be a database which will underpin the data flowing into that. Now, I have a niece in Galway who has had her 8th, and I'm talking about her 8th call for a vaccine. She's had the vaccine. She's actually got all her vaccines at this stage, frontline worker, but this week she got her 8th call inviting her to come in for a vaccine. Now, if that's the current state of the knowledge of those who have vaccines, I don't see how this green cert can work under any circumstance.
Well, I think we'll think a little bit more optimistically than that, Senator Cockburn. I note your reservations, but maybe for a concluding remark from Mr. Hackett and Mr. Dawson, maybe in a positive light in terms of what now. I believe the capacity is there, and we have a time frame now, but it needs to get underway straight away. So what are in summary, what are your principal asks, both of ourselves as a committee and government in terms of the digital green cert being fast forward?
You take it.
We are optimistic, and that is a really amazing thing to say for a business and for an industry that is 14 months with zero trading, but we are in a different place. The vaccine rollout is happening, the numbers are moving. We're not, unduly critical of the Department of Health with regard to that. We then have the digital green certificate, which is this EU-wide, result that will open our airports,
put the pilots back in the air, all the airport staff back working, all the hospitality sector and hotel staff, the restaurants, the cafes, the bars, absolutely everybody who relies on this. Like we have to think that we are this global interconnected island. We have amazing connectivity. We have an amazing hospitality industry here. We've got to get back our welcome to outside visitors and get them in. And the digital green certificate has to be seen as something that is respectful of public health and is the solution to do so. It's not a passport, it's a certificate. It covers your vaccination. If you don't have vaccination, you have a PCR test. If you don't want to do that and you've recovered from COVID, that's it. So it's very fair. It's not some demonised additional passport or control mechanism. It is a route to freedom in terms of international travel in and out of this island to restore us to some sort of economic sensibility.
Thank you.
And I can say that the Irish Travel Agents Association, we're talking to the Department of Transport tomorrow. We will enlighten them further of where we're at with the digital certificate and the urgency that this committee has put. And we can see that from all the senators and deputies that it needs urgency on this thing. Okay. It needs to happen tomorrow. And with your support and with the support of all the people in this country, we will get up flying, but we need fast help from the government.
Okay. In summary, Mr. Hackett, did you send us in the credit card companies their difficulties with, and also your correspondence with the various government departments? We will be following up with the Department of Transport and the other departments, including the Department of Health, to fast forward in terms of the rollout of our pilot programme, particularly around antigen testing, to feed in with the digital green cert, to get it up and running as quickly as possible. If there's a 6-month delay, time lag, up to where it's not implemented until the end of, at that stage it would be the 1st of August. That's too late. I think we're all agreeable on that. I would like to thank our witnesses. Senator Buttimer, did you wish to come back in for a second?
Just going to ask, in terms of the merchant service providers, how widespread is it?
Senator, it is widespread, and the way they act, I mean, they have no manners as such, because I know of small travel agencies who are told, by the way, unless you have 40,000, 30,000, money sent to us within 2 weeks, we will cut you off. They have no manners, no ethics whatsoever, and they will shut down people. It's widespread, but it comes out of the blue. There's no flags about it. They just say, this is the rule, take it or leave it, and they don't care who they close down. And really, our central bank and the people who control them, really they need to be, and I hopefully, Chairman, that your committee would call them in, or whoever.
We'll follow up on Senator Buttimer's specific proposal, but to do that we need obviously the details of exactly who's, because there may be some of them that are operating in a very fair way, and it's never never all. It's not an homogenous group, no doubt. So, Senator Buttimer, are you happy that we conclude on that point?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
I would like to thank our witnesses, Pat Dawson and Paul Hackett, for attending today's and engaging with our committee at such short notice. This meeting is now adjourned. The next meeting of the Joint Committee will be a private virtual meeting at 4 p.m. next Tuesday, the 11th of May. Thank you all very much, and we'll all work together in an optimistic way.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. Thank you very much.